Good day, students. Today it is time for the second installment of this series, where I attempt to give you an overview of each unit's eidolons and my recommendations on whether or not they are worth the Stellar Jade's investment. Since they have released quite a few banger units in quick succession, going on a vertical investment on your account might be detrimental. But even so, for those of you who already have an established roster of units and are looking to improve it, this will be a series to watch. Let us go over the destruction cast of the game, after we go over the obligatory disclaimers, of course. Please note that these recommendations are based on my personal experience with the units, how they perform at E0, and what they lack in their base form. As such, I have formulated this guide based on the importance of each eidolon in fixing a particular unit problem from its base kit. This guide is highly subjected to subjectivity on my end, even though I have tried to keep it as objective as possible. Therefore, if you feel a certain eidolon works better for you compared to what I am about to mention, that is entirely your prerogative, and each and every one of you is entitled to play the game as you want. Therefore, do not feel pressured into getting a particular one just because I mentioned it is hotter than this summer's biggest hit. As always, every piece of content in this game can be fully cleared with E0 units without issue. As usual, I will go briefly on each unit's strengths and main weaknesses in the next section, so you will better understand the analysis of each eidolon in the following section. Also, each eidolon will be analyzed, considering you already had the previous eidolon and are debating the investment needed to secure the one in question as well. This is why you will see some units have their E1 not recommended, but their E2 recommended. And before I forget, I will not go over the E3 and E5 eidolons of the units, because these are just extra levels for all your abilities on each unit. And of course, all of them are worth getting because they are just straight-up damage buffs for each of the units. I will just leave you with a note on which unit is applicable, so you can know which one of the two will provide the most damage. Let's not forget what you should be looking for in eidolons for units on this path. For destruction units, you want to aim for the eidolons that will provide your unit with additional ways of buffing your own damage, survivability, or stats, as the units from this path have the second highest aggro value in the game. Well, maybe third after preservation units and Ting Yun. Other desirable effects are those that add a new damage form not present in the base kit or increased multipliers to said base kit. Also, eidolons that provide you with energy are always great so you can smooth out your rotation. Arlan, HP consuming variant 4-star version of Blade. He does decently high multipliers, and he doesn't consume skill points, as the requirement to use his abilities is his own HP. Lacks the self-heal which Blade has, as the self-heal from his trace will only activate when you defeat an enemy while Arlan is under 30% HP. This restriction makes him extremely vulnerable, as he will basically drain his own HP in a few turns. Hook. Although categorized as a destruction unit, Hook has more single targets in her kit compared to the traditional blast-type destruction units, but her damage is nothing to sneeze at. Her biggest drawback is the same strength that she has, as the fact that she is mostly single-target focus when the game pushes for blast or AoE content more frequently. Also, she's very much dependent on the enemy being afflicted by burn to maximize her damage. Misha. Great shield-breaking capability, also good in freezing compositions. Like Hook is mostly a destruction unit just by name, as he is mostly single-target focused. Also, like Hook, he lacks the traditional blast capabilities of destruction units, and his ultimate bounces suffer from the same problem as Bailu's skill, as the bounces can hit the wrong targets. Xueyi, an absolute killer of the toughness bar, especially against quantum-weak enemies. Her ultimate also allows her to ignore the elemental weakness of the enemy and still deplete the toughness bar. She will also inflict the quantum break when she breaks an enemy with her ultimate, regardless if said enemy is weak to quantum or not. requires a great amount of investment in her stats, and does not pair well with units who are not actively reducing the toughness bar of the enemy, as she wants to deal that toughness-reducing killing blow as much as possible. Blade. Versatile damage dealer, which can act just as fine as a secondary DPS in your team's skill point efficient unit, as his skill point consumption is lower compared to other carries. Performs well in single target and in AoE scenarios. You still need a sustainer to be paired with him, especially for harder contents. It doesn't really have dedicated harmony support, as neither harmony unit released so far will provide HP buffs. Clara has potentially one of the highest damage ceilings in the game if the right conditions are met, especially in AoE scenarios. And like Blade, it is also a pretty durable DPS unit. As her damage scales to the amount of attacks triggered by the enemies, if she faces a slow attacking enemy, her damage will fall off a cliff. Also, the counterattacks are a backloaded attack in nature, so they are not that appealing in content where you want to have quick, consistent damage. Destruction. Daniel. Incredible damage dealer from also a desirable element, good in single target scenarios, but can also deal with some AoE attack content, as his damage is blast focused, easy to build as well thanks to his base stats. Extremely skill-hungry unit, and is also not recommended to play on auto, as the AI is not optimized to take advantage of his kit properly. Jingliu. Superb damage output, low skill point consumption, an obscene amount of stats provided from her base kit, and 100% action advance from her talent. Damage falls off a cliff while not in her enhanced state. Like Destruction Daniel, manual play is recommended, as the AI will not take advantage of her kit and waste her ultimate most of the time. E1. A small damage increase to his skill, which activates while he is under 50% HP. Not worth picking up as its uptime will be inconsistent and the value is also not great. E2. Gives him a cleanse for himself each time he uses his skill or ultimate, pretty decent pickup, as it will help with his survivability issues. Please note though that this will not work against CC. E4. Gives him a revive, but the caveat is that it only be active for the first 2 turns of the battle for some reason. Due to the restrictive duration, you won't see it pop off, therefore it is not recommended. E6. This one is actually quite decent, as it will make the adjacent targets of your ultimate damage take the same damage as the primary target, allowing him to become quite a nuker. This one is recommended. E1. Her E1 increases the damage of her enhanced skill, but since this enhanced version is tied to how often you can use your ultimate and the value provided by the increase is not that great, this results in only a small overall damage increase. Not recommended. E2. Extends the duration of the burn caused by the skill, which in turn means more damage from her talent, technique, and skill as well. Decent pickup, smooths out her rotations. E4 turns her talent burn proxies into a blast attack, giving her a bit more AoE capabilities. Also a decent pickup. E6. A 20% damage increase if the enemy is burned, and as you have reached this point, you are pretty much consistently burning the enemy. Nice pickup, but by no means necessary, as it is not that big of a damage increase in her overall damage. E1. More hits done by his ultimate, but as again each hit is random, this one still does not fix his ultimate reliability issues. But if you get lucky to get each target to hit the enemy you want, then you are in for a spectacle. All in all, not recommended. E2. Give every hit of his ultimate a chance to reduce the defense of the hit target, which, although not by a big amount, defense reduction is a valuable damage buff to have, which makes this one a good pickup. E4. Increase the damage of each hit of his ultimate by 6%. This one turns his ultimate multiplier to a monstrosity upwards of 1000%. But again, you will not see this amount on a single target. Also, keep in mind that he still has 4-star base stats, so don't start drooling. Good damage increases pickup. E6. Adds even more damage to his ultimate and also lets his next skill recover 1 skill point. Decent pickup, but by no means necessary, as the damage increase is not that high and the occasional skill point is also not that big of a deal. E1. A 40% damage increase to her talent, which is nice, as in her ideal team, she should trigger the talent quite frequently. Good pickup. E2. Continues on the E1 trend, and now also adds the same effect as her ultimate to her talent follow-up attack, meaning when her talent breaks an enemy, it will always trigger the quantum break effect. Talent will also heal her for a small amount when triggered, and it will ignore the elemental weakness of the enemy when depleting the toughness bar. Decent pickup as well. E4. A nice break effect bonus while using her ultimate, which will help your overall stats threshold on her. It is nice to have, but not recommended if you already have some amazing relic pieces. E6. Reduce the amount of karma stacks needed from 8 to 6, which translates to more follow-up attacks from her talent, which in turn translate into more damage done by her, and a substantial one at that. Good pickup. E1. An increase for his single target damage, although not that high, and he does not need it. Not recommended. E2. A 15% crit rate buff while he is in his skill state effect. As he will be almost always in this state, this effectively a permanent 15% crit rate, which should help you with your relic farming. Although nice, it is also not recommended if you already have good pieces. E4. A 40% HP buff, as he will reach the 50% threshold multiple times per battle. And since his damage scales with his max HP, this translates to a pretty sizable increase in not only survivability but also damage. Therefore, this one is recommended. E6. Reduce the charges needed for his talent to trigger by 1 and also add additional HP scaling to its scaling. Similar to his E4, this will boost both his survivability and damage by a good amount at the same time. As such, this one is also recommended. E1 is a substantial damage increase, especially in AoE scenarios, as the countermark inflicted on the enemies with her talent will no longer disappear when using her skill, meaning the Svarog counter will be able to continuously proc for as long as the enemy attacks keep coming, and also her skill will now deal double the damage since the mark will remain on the enemy. Great pickup. E2. A nice attack buff after using the ultimate so her counter will hit harder. Although the damage increase is not that high, attack percent can be a pretty diluted buff. Therefore, it is not recommended. E4 increases her survivability, allowing you to build more offensively and forego some defensive stats from her relics. E6. Another massive damage increase in AoE scenarios by increasing the number of enhanced counters from her ultimate by 1 and also extending Svarog's protection to each member of the team. Another great pickup. E1. Increase his talent damage percent buff, which also makes it easier to stack. Not recommended, as the additional damage provided by this is not that high. E2. Possibly the strongest Eidolon in the game, it basically allows him to do a free, fully enhanced basic attack after using his ultimate, allowing for some insane burst damage with the right setup. This one provides the biggest damage increase for him, therefore this one is highly recommended. E4 allows him to maintain his crit damage buff from the skill until the end of his next turn, translating into, you could do one fully enhanced basic to first stack it up, do your ultimate, and immediately follow up with the next fully enhanced basic from his E2, which will benefit from the crit damage buff from the start. While there is also a decent damage increase, it is not recommended, especially compared to the obscene damage increase from his E2. E6. With a bit of patience, translate to 60% imaginary resistance penetration. Another good damage increase, but it's also not recommended as, like E4, it's quite a bit smaller compared to the boost provided by E2, and you will also want to delay the ultimate uses of your allies until your next enhanced basic is ready. E1 greatly improves her single target damage and also comes with a 24% crit damage buff while using her enhanced skill or ultimate, which in ideal conditions will be most of the time. For single target scenarios, it's absolutely recommended. For every other case, it's not recommended. E2, a pretty good damage increase as it will boost the damage of your next enhanced skill if played properly. But even so, it's not recommended, as she already does an obscene amount of damage, and this particular damage increase is not that high for her overall damage, as it will only affect one skill usage. E4 will provide her with more attack, which will turn into a decent damage buff, but attack percent can be easily diluted, and she already gets a good amount from her base kit. Also not recommended. E6, a 50% crit damage buff in her enhanced state, and also allows her to get one more enhanced skill before exiting the state, therefore extending her state duration, meaning a good overall damage increase. Apart from her E1 single target damage increase, this one will be the biggest damage increase for her, therefore this is a good pickup. Well, that was a bit more work than the first one, but hopefully you now have a better understanding on the strength of each destruction unit, as well as their weaknesses, and can start planning ahead to which one of them to target when they will rerun, or when they will spook you after a 50-50 loss. As in the first video, let me know what is your plan. Are you planning on starting to vertically invest in your destruction units? And if so, how far are you planning to, or how far have you already gotten? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I am Professor Veritas Ratio, and remember, stay smart and sexy.